this is a little sequence. It's all done from this kind of 90-90, or I think this is also called a shin box position. And we're gonna get into the mid-back, the rib cage, and the hips from this position. And I'm gonna do it all on one side, and then I'm gonna flip over and do the second side. So we're gonna actually start off kind of more in this like side leaning position. So I'm on this right hip, my right elbow's underneath my right shoulder, and I'm kind of roughly making a straight line through my torso right out through this top leg. I'm gonna start off actually first with a little bit of a almost little baby side plank. So I'm gonna push this bottom arm down into the floor, lifting these lower ribs as I reach. And when I say reach, I'm not just like flinging my arm up here, I'm reaching and drawing that rib cage away from this top side of the top hip. All right, so we're gonna hold here for a couple breaths. And this is an active position. So I'm not here, I'm pushing through that bottom arm. And I like to kind of think about two different aspects of the position as I breathe here. So as I exhale, I might push a little bit more into this lower arm, lifting through this bottom side of my waist. And as I inhale, I might reach a little bit farther, trying to create a little more distance between these fingertips and that extended knee. And then I'm gonna hold on to this sense of reaching and pushing the floor away, but I'm gonna rotate ever so slightly into the floor. So my sternum is gonna rotate down. I'm gonna keep that same focus with my breath, inhaling for length, exhaling, seeing if I can draw this lower side of the rib cage away from the floor a little bit more by engaging these muscles and pushing through here. And then I'm going to continue into that rotation, taking this top arm to the floor. The bottom arm can kind of spin out of the way. So now I have both arms. I'm just going to reorient. So I'm sort of in this position here. So this position might look familiar. This isn't about the hips though. This is more about my mid-back, rib cage. So I'm just going to press myself away from the floor, especially on this right side. If I really push into that right elbow, like I'm trying to push it through the floor, that helps me rotate into this position a little bit more. Nice position to just hang out and breathe. Keep the jaw and neck relaxed. And just using your breath to create a little extra movement through that rib cage. And then from here, I'm gonna add a little bit more rotation. I'm gonna take this top arm and I'm gonna reach it up and away. And I'm gonna push from this arm. So I'm kind of reaching, opening up that chest. I like a little inhale here. And then as I exhale, I'm gonna take this arm and I'm gonna reach it underneath. So it's reaching underneath this supporting arm as if I'm trying to touch the back corner of the mat there. Same thing, I like an inhale here and then exhale into this open position. So it's an inhale while you're in position, exhale to move, or whatever you like. I like an inhale while I'm here because I can get that inhale to kind of add a little bit of almost a stretch from the inside out. And then I'm going to come into a little bit more of a hip focus. My legs are still in the same position, but I'm going to start to lift myself up a bit. Depending on your hip mobility, you might still be kind of leaning, or you might be able to sit quite upright. But we can, from here, just start to explore the hips a little bit. So I could bring my sternum forward towards that front knee. I could come a little bit more through the chest. I could walk those hands and find just different angles and just different lines of tension. So reaches, you could even find a little kind of thread the needle while you're here on either arm, and just creating a little bit of different variety of position. You could hold positions. And I also like to spend a little bit of time orienting myself over this rear leg. So again, I'm just going to reposition. I'm still on the first side. My legs are still in the same orientation, but moving over here, this is all about this kind of front right hip, or this right hip here. But if I start to bring my center of mass a little bit back, I can start to play with a little bit of internal rotation in this rear hip. So I'm almost, the way you could think about this is you can almost think about trying to drop this back pocket towards the floor. Make sure this feels safe in the knee and in the hip. This shouldn't feel pinchy, it shouldn't feel too torquey in that knee. For some people it will, so this isn't gonna be the most valuable part of this position by any means. But if you're feeling okay to move into that, we can get into some deep kind of capsular stretchy sensations where we're feeling some kind of deep stretch by kind of sitting back towards this rear leg and then bringing ourselves forward over that front leg. This will feel more like that kind of classic pigeon or glute stretch. And then I can push myself back here. Now, as I do this, I actually like to do this with limited assistance from my hands and using those muscles that are moving into length to control my position. So in this case, those lengthened hip muscles are having to hold a bit of activation to keep me from like flopping down. I also need a little bit of core tension, and then they are pushing me out of that stretched position as I come back into this rear leg. I'm gonna do one more, same thing. This rear leg is kind of, I'm almost sitting into the rear leg a little more. You can see this guy's pretty non-weight bearing. So this rear leg is now kind of supporting me. It can push me back over that front leg. So just finding a little bit more activity while we're in these kind of more classic stretchy positions is a great way to work on some mobility. Okay, and then I'm gonna just do that all on the other side. So from this side, I could certainly move through a few little transitions and let those hips kind of move a little bit more dynamically, using my arms as I need. So you could find a little bit of dynamic rotation, moving those legs with as much control as possible. So notice my feet are sort of the pivot point, and I'm rotating those legs over top. I'm also thinking about kind of rotating the legs through with as much control as possible, which means I'm trying not to just like flop them side to side. I actually like to think about the kneecaps. Can I keep them always pointing to a different spot in the room? Can I minimize how much time that those kneecaps both point to the same direction? All right, okay, so I'm gonna find myself onto this left side and I'm gonna repeat right from the beginning. So I'm in this 90-90 position on the second side. I'm gonna drop down onto that elbow, making a nice straight line. Remember that it starts off more about the spine, rib cage, a little bit of shoulder. We're gonna start off with this nice little push through the bottom side arm, lifting the lower side of the waist and reaching with that top arm. Nice little time for some breath here. Again, what I did on the first side was as I exhale, I think about kind of pushing the floor away, lifting this rib cage a little bit more, and as I inhale, I think about finding a little more reach. 2 or 3 breaths there, and then continue that sense of reaching this top arm, really pulling this top side away from the lower, or that top side knee. But I'm starting to rotate into the floor a little bit. Sternum is orienting downwards. I'm still pushing the floor away with this supporting shoulder and lifting from these lower muscles within the rib cage and core. And then I finish up by rotating fully into the floor. This can be a bit more of a passive position, although I take care of the neck and shoulders and find a little bit of integrity there. Otherwise, you can just hang out and breathe here. I did on that first side was I cued. Now I'm on my left hip, so my left elbow, if I push it into the floor a little bit more, that kind of rotates me a little deeper into the left. And I like to just hang out here and use the breath to really create some nice movement through that rib cage and torso. So nice long exhales will get the air out, so then the inhale will be nice and big and expansive. From here, I'm going to take this, in this case the right arm, and I'm going to push myself away from the floor, opening up a bit here. I can pause for an inhale. Might feel that inhale kind of push into the chest. And then I take this arm and I reach it underneath. So again, I'm going to reorient. My position is the same, I'm just changing the position so you can see. And I like maybe 3 to 5 of these. Do as you like though, hold for longer, do less. Keep them a little more flowy and do more. Okay, and then I'm going to push myself up into a more hip-focused end to this stretch. So my legs are still in the same position. You can alter the leg position. So this sequence is really for folks who have some access to some positions here. If you needed to, the feet could come a little closer, or the front foot could come a little closer to the knee, or you could also prop by putting a little something underneath this front hip. It makes it a little harder to kind of explore positions, but if that's your option, that's your option. Also, use the hands as you need. Don't turn yourself into this like rounded, really torquing into certain areas. Use your hands to lean if you need. I'm going to start to explore that front hip. So I'm going to bring myself, really think about bringing from the pelvis over this front hip and finding maybe some little reaches and stretches. There's no real rules here. You could explore, you could hold, you could find more of those little kind of thread the needle sort of stretches. Again, that'll get the pelvis and the rib cage moving a bit more here. So after exploring that front hip, I'm going to start to bring myself into that rear hip a little bit more. So in this case, I'm just kind of pushing myself back, pushing from this front leg and taking my center of mass back into this rear, I'm going to call this my rear hip, which is my right hip. And I'm kind of thinking about letting that right hip move as close to the floor as I comfortably can. I want to stay fairly long through my spine. So if I need to, again, I can hold and support with my hands. I want to avoid that torque sensation in the knee. I want to keep it pretty stretchy sensation in the hip, not pinchy or painful. And then I'm going to bring myself back over that front leg. In this case, I'm going to minimize the use of my hands, so I'm engaging my core a little bit, and I'm controlling myself into that position of stretch by using this hip. Hands are fair game though. I can pause briefly, and then I'm going to take this front hip, that front leg, it's going to push down into the floor, driving me away from it and moving me onto this rear leg. Again, use the hands as you need. This guy, I can get into this rear hip quite well for me, so this front leg gets a little kind of light. And then I'm going to take this this right leg, and it's going to drive me out of that position over this front hip. I'm going to do one more here, just holding briefly, focusing on moving my pelvis over top of those legs. And there you go. You could certainly do a few more of those little alternating sort of transitions, but a nice little sequence, or one that I like that works well for my body to get into the